Hey, friends. Hope you're doing well. I want to talk about Tina Turner today since she passed away yesterday. The first thing that I noticed when friends and people started talking about her, it's kind of amazing how different lenses people looked at her. Where there was a lot of people who think of her as like an '80s singer. I heard that a lot, and that seemed like a that just seemed really crazy to me because I didn't think of her like that at all. But I realized most people probably know about her through What's Love Got to Do with This and the Mad Max movie. Was it Beyond Thunderdome? I remember seeing that in the theater, and that's probably the period that most people would know of her. But man, as a kid in Wanamaker, Indiana, some little small town, I remember my uncle had a couple of her records, Ike and Tina Turner records, and it was just great. There was nothing in my ears that sounded like that. I didn't know about that world, but hearing Proud Mary, their version of Proud Mary, that was amazing to me. That's the lens. I know a lot of people think of her as the Acid Queen and Tommy. It's kind of neat that somebody could have that many. It could affect people in such a way that they would think of one single person that differently depending on who it was. That's interesting to me. And by the way, I'm in my car because I tried to do this in the backyard this morning, and my neighbor has a chainsaw out, and it was loud as hell. So I figured, hell with it. I got in the car, drove down the street, and so that's why I'm in the car. But Tina Turner, man, those Ike and Tina Turner records when I was a kid, you know, those are amazing to me. That's how I think of her, as like this early rock and roll pioneer of the second wave of rock and roll when rhythm and blues music burst into rock and roll. I think of her that way, and I can I can only imagine what it would have been like when they were touring with CCR or the Stones, and having this white audience who'd never witnessed anything like that come out on a big stage and have this full rhythm and blues review, a show, and these beautiful, strong black women coming out and dancing, and all the energy that would be along that. I love the Stones and I love Creedence. And those are the records that I would put on if I'm going to listen to records or whatever. But as a live experience, I have to believe that, when the Ikeettes got out there and did their thing, that would be a hard show to follow. If I'm in the audience, I'd be like, what? Especially as these white audiences that never had experienced anything like that. They weren't going to shows in the Chitlin circuit. I should back up and say I think Tina Turner is one of those great American success stories. Born, born into poverty, having a bad home life, abusive home life, then ended up in an abusive relationship with Ike, and they played in the Chitlin circuit. I remember reading that they would do like 90 dates in a row, like shows every night for 90 days. Now imagine those of you out there who play music. Imagine that your band or whoever, you're playing in the nicest small venue in your hometown. Let's imagine you do that for 90 days, and each night you come home and you sleep in your comfortable bed in your house. You do that 90 days straight. That's going to get rough. And that's playing a nice place at home or whatever. Now imagine doing that on the Chitlin circuit, where you're in a different city every single day. The routing sucks. You're playing in places they're just makeshift venues. And you're playing for people, a lot of them would be a pretty rough crowd, and you might have trouble getting paid on a lot of those shows, and you might end up in a fight with somebody to get paid once a week, and then you throw in the whole institutional racism thing where you're going through the South and you can't even find a hotel that you can stay in, or someplace to eat. Just all of those troubles. 90 days in a row, she was on those tours. And man, it made that band tight and tough. And when they're able to come out of that and turn it into a Vegas show and just playing for a completely different audience. So that might be something that's commonplace for black audiences in the 60s to witness those kind of shows like James Brown and all that. But when they started playing, I hate to make it such a, I'm sorry to like dwell on this so much, but I think it's really important to think about what an impact seeing them live would be when you have never seen anything like that in your life. Just somebody growing up in Wanamaker, Indiana. And I remember watching The Tonight Show, and she would come on. There's clips on YouTube, lots of clips of them coming on talk shows. I think Sonny and Cher show, things like that. That's probably how she came into my life as a little bitty kid. But it was a big deal. I remember everything stopped when Tina Turner's on TV, and we're talking about 1974 or something, and everybody went and watched the television. And just a strong woman who was like, we talk about great front men. Well, this is a great front woman, who was in charge of the stage. And it wasn't all sexuality and all of that. It was like a cool person, like a really cool, strong person taking over. And that's how I see Tina Turner. So by the time I was older and the 80s came around and she had pop hits or whatever, it was kind of like, oh, that's cool, whatever. But my brain was thinking of that older stuff back when. And then she later, decided she became a rich and powerful person with, in the 80s, whatever. And I think sometime soon after, she moved to Switzerland and lived in Zurich for the rest of her life. And, I think it's a great American success story. A person who came out of an area, faced all of that adversity or whatever, and then managed to just like decide there's somewhere else that they would rather be. And they went there. She became a Swiss citizen, I believe. I didn't know about her health problems at all. I just didn't know any of that stuff, but I guess she had a lot of health problems late in life. But she did a country record. It's Tina Turns on the Country, I think is what it's called. And if you own a copy of it, take care of it. It's worth a lot of money. Apparently she didn't like that album at all and kind of put the squash on it after the initial release, and it never became a CD. It was never pressed as a CD. So if you get on eBay and look for copies of that album, it's pretty expensive. I looked this morning and I saw a copy for $100, and then the most expensive one was $3,000. I have no idea what the difference is between those, but that's a little bit too pricey for me. But I looked up, out of curiosity, I listened to some of those songs. It's on YouTube. There's like a playlist of that. I think it's Tina Turns on the Country is the name of the album. And she's doing Help Me Make It Through the Night. There's a couple Dylan covers on there. And it's pretty damn interesting. I thought it was pretty cool. There's a Tonight I'll Be With You, the Dylan song, and that's smoking. I mean, it's really, really good. And the first song is Bayou, and it kind of has a feel. I think this was in 1974, 1975, somewhere in there. It has a feel. It has like that outlaw thing that was happening right then. You can feel a lot of that. James Burton is the guitar player. J.D. Manis, James Burton, that's pretty great. And then J.D. Manis played steel, who played on some of that Sweethearts of the Rodeo stuff with the Byrds. And, Buck Owens. And I forget what else he played on. but great steel player. It's an interesting record, and I don't even think it's on Spotify or any of that, but it's worth looking up on YouTube. You might enjoy that. But she also, I remember in my Frank Zappa biography I read, he said some nice things about her being really nice, because she sang, the Ikettes sang backup on some Frank Zappa record. I forget right off the top of my head which it was. I looked this morning trying to find my Zappa biography and I couldn't find it, but so I Googled around and I found some quotes from it online. And now I think it was around 1973 or 74. They were living, Ike and Tina were living in Los Angeles, and Ike opened up a really great recording studio, like a really great one, and which is interesting in itself. And I'm trying really hard not to frame this all around Ike, because Ike was a pretty terrible man, and she shouldn't be seen through his lens. But I mean, a lot of the part of her career I really liked was when she was doing stuff with him. So forgive me for some of that. But this studio is really good. McCartney and George Harrison recorded there. I forget who else. There were some biggest names of the time recorded there. And Zappa was recording there. I think there were multiple rooms in this facility, in this studio. And he wanted some background singers for something that he was doing. And he's talking to his manager, and his manager was like, "Why don't you just get the Ikettes?" And he's like, "I can get the Ikettes," and Zappa was all about that. And he said, "Sure, this is a quote from the book here. It's Zappa. He says, I wanted to put some backup singers on the thing, and the road manager who was with us at the time checked into it and said, well, why don't you just use the Ikettes?" And I said, "I can get the Ikettes? That's Zappa." And so they brought him in, and he's having them do this really complicated stuff that takes a couple days to do, but they're working their ass off on it. Tina's working her ass off trying to, make all of this sound great, which you can imagine. It's Zappa. You can imagine how complicated it might be. But now Zappa says, this is in his biography, he says, but you know what the gimmick was? We had to agree, Ike Turner insisted, that we pay these girls no more than $25 a song, because that's what he paid them. Frank says in the book, he says, and no matter how many hours it took, I could not pay them any more than $25 per song per girl, including Tina. And I don't know. This article that I'm looking at here to find these quotes, I remember seeing this in the book, but the article claimed that Frank might have been exaggerating with that. Although, I don't know. It doesn't cost much more than that to get singers these days to do that, like in Nashville, but you couldn't get them to work on it for 2 days or whatever. You'd get them to work on it for a half hour or something. But it says the singers were actually paid $25 per hour, according to the session invoice, which showed they got $187.50 each for 7.5 hours of service. But the singers worked hard for that money. And I don't know. It says it was so difficult that one part in the middle of the song, Montana, that the three girls rehearsed it for a couple of days. And Zappa says, just that one section, the part that goes, I'm plucking the old dental floss, right in the middle there. I can't remember her name, but one of the harmony singers, she got it first. She came out and sang her part, and the other girls had to follow her track. Tina was so pleased that she was able to sing this thing that she went into the next studio where Ike was working and dragged him into the studio to hear the result of her labor. He listened to the tape, and he said, "What is this shit?" and walked out. Ike Turner did not dig it. So the last thing here about Tina singing on the Zappa record, Zappa says, I don't know how she managed to stick with that guy for so long. He treated her terribly, and she's a really nice lady. We were recording down there on a Sunday. She wasn't involved with the session, but she came in on Sunday with a whole pot of stew that she brought for everyone working in the studio. Like out of nowhere, here's Tina Turner coming in with a rag on her head, bringing a pot of stew. It was really, really nice. That's Frank Zappa talking about Tina Turner. And I also was trying to remember in different biographies that I've read, just trying to remember mentions of Tina Turner. And I remember Keith Richards said some nice stuff in his biography, I think his life, and said something to the effect of that she was just wonderful and she just was great on stage every single night. And the tour they were doing was the first tour where Keith was playing in open tunings, you know, the open G tuning or whatever, and he ended up ditching the low E string and just using 5 strings for a lot of that stuff, Keith's 5-string thing. And he said that Ike pulled him aside one night after the show into a room, and he's like, show me that 5-string shit you've been doing, where he thought it was really cool. So Keith got to show him how to do that stuff. And he talked about what an honor that was, because he was so into, you know, what Ike and Tina were doing and so influenced by it that he was able to turn around and actually show them something he was doing, and what an honor that was. And so I thought I'd throw that in there. And then there was also some good stuff in John Fogerty's biography where he talked about Tina, and I figured I would share just a little bit of that with you. This is John Fogerty from his book, Fortunate Son, his biography. He says, I had noticed Tina Turner early on, long before she and Ike did Proud Mary. The Blue Velvets used to do It's Gonna Work Out Fine. It was funny and funky and had this cool guitar riff dripping in tremolo. Flash forward to 1967, and here are these singers getting lots of credit in the underground world, Janis and Grace Slick. I just thought, man, Tina could sing circles around them. I was overjoyed by Ike and Tina's version of Proud Mary. That was their most commercial mainstream hit up to that point. It felt like a really positive thing, that sense of paying back and honoring your influences. We played some dates together. Ike loved Fortunate Son. He'd be up on stage and toss that lick into one of their songs. Can you imagine how that felt? So we played with them at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, which of course is the spiritual center of Mormonism. I've been to the Salt Palace. I'd go out in the audience to watch Ike and Tina, and this time I noticed all these monitors, older guys in civilian clothes acting like security guards. This is a Mormon thing. If anybody got up and started dancing, these guys would tap on their shoulder and lead them back to their chair. Tina went into her version of Otis Redding's I've Been Loving You Too Long. She'd get real suggestive with the microphone, doing pretty much everything you could do with a mic, especially if it represented some guy that you were attracted to. It's going to get a little risque here. Now, the elders in the audience were freaking out, just losing their minds, jumping up and down. I don't know if they thought they were going to stop the show or what. All I remember is Tina taking her sweet time with that microphone. I'm loving every second of it. Back then, I didn't know any of the stuff about Ike that we had heard later. I'm an honorable guy, and I love women. I love and respect my life completely. We treat each other as equals. Therefore, I don't have much respect for Ike Turner. And that's John Fogerty talking about Ike and Tina. Man, it's hard to segue from that. There's a story I want to share since we're on this Ike thing. There's a guy I met in Nashville. This is 20 years ago. And it really bothers me because I love this story and I don't remember who the guy was or what his name was, but he was a successful songwriter. He's written hits and successful songwriter. And I believe my buddy Earl Bud Lee introduced me to him, but it's been a long time. And I don't remember the guy, and I feel bad. Maybe you guys know who I'm talking about when I tell this story. We hung out one night for a few hours, and he was real nice, and we got along great. And he's telling me the story about how he got started in the music business. He said that he had left home at a really young age. I don't know where home was, but he moved to Los Angeles, and he was going to make it. He was going to get into the music business. His first day there, he just is walking around all day long, has no idea what he's doing, has no plan, just walking around. After a whole day of just aimlessly wandering around, he's just like, what am I doing? You know, this is a terrible idea. I don't even know how to start. He ends up walking down this alley, and as he's walking there feeling bad and thinking about going home, this door flies open and a guy comes falling out backwards, and he falls right on his back, and this big, tough, huge man comes out and points, and he says, and don't you come back in here. And he looks over, this man looks over at the guy telling the story. He says, who the hell are you? What are you doing? Something like that. And he's like, nothing. He's like, you play guitar? And the guy says, yeah. And he says, get your ass in here. He goes in. It's Ike Turner. He's doing a session. He gets mad at the guitar player and throws him out, and puts a guitar in this guy's hand, and he plays on this session, and he says, that's how I got into the music business. I love that story. I have no idea who he is. If you're that guy and we met years ago, tell me, you know. So I just love that story. I think about it every now and then, but I hadn't seen the guy in forever and don't remember who it was. But thought I would share that. And also, I'll share my friend. I have a friend who works for Rod Stewart. I've talked about her a few different times. And she was playing, they were going to go to Zurich on a tour. And I just happened to mention at dinner once, I'm like, does Tina Turner, I know that, you know, she was friends with Rod Stewart. I said, does she ever come to the gigs when you guys play in Zurich? And she said, yeah, she comes out. And I said, was she cool? She nice? And she was really nice. And do you know if she'll be there this time? You know, I was just thinking about that. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if she had really bad health problems there towards the end. I heard she had a kidney replacement and she had a stroke at some time. But you never heard much about her for a long time, where I think she intentionally stayed out of the limelight. And people might wonder, like, why would you move to Switzerland? Man, Switzerland's great. I've really enjoyed, like, it's hard to get your mind around being somewhere else, but sometimes you're there and you can just kind of see, yeah, I can completely see why people would love living here. And the first time I played in Zurich, I remember, this is just an idea, just to give you an idea what it's like, just an abstract background. First time I played in Zurich, I was playing at this venue. They'd contacted my agent and asked if I'd do it, and they agreed to pay me a flat amount, just a flat fee to come there. It's pretty hard to get there, but I wanted to play in Zurich. I can't remember where I came from, but I had to fly in from a tour. It's probably somewhere in England or maybe in Scandinavia. I can't remember, but I flew to Zurich. I went and played the gig. It ended up being sold out, and it was really great. It was a nice venue, wonderful people. I mean, they treated me so nice. And after the show, we're kind of sitting around with the promoters who run the venue, and they said, we've been talking about this, and we enjoyed your show so much, and we enjoyed being around you so much. we've decided to pay you more than was agreed upon. I'm like, really? And I said, yeah. So they they paid me twice as much as we agreed upon, even though the deal was that I would receive a flat fee. They said, no, we enjoyed it, and we enjoyed you, and we think we should pay you more. And they gave me twice as much money. And now, if you play a house concert or something like that, something like in the States, something like that might happen. I've never, ever heard of anything like that in the States from like a venue where they double your agreed upon price. Everything is so profit driven. The profit motive is in everything in the States, but just it was such a window into how different people look at things, just see things differently. And it struck me pretty hard, and they were so nice to me. And I went back and played again. They were just really nice to me, and I really loved that. And I also, so I can see why, people, who knows what experiences she might have had. There were a severe contrast to what she experienced growing up in the South in the 50s and the 60s, And I could see that. But I also, the first time I ever played in Switzerland, I was contacted by some promoters in Herisau who watched the channel. How you guys doing? It's good. They've contacted me before, but this is a long time ago. And I agreed to come play in Herisau. It was like it was really, really hard to get there. But I wanted to say, hey, I played in Switzerland. I'd never done it before. So I remember leaving from Nottingham the night after a gig in Nottingham. I flew that morning to Zurich, got on a train, went to Herisau, and I played the gig. It was really, really hard to get there, and it was really hard to get back. It took a lot of effort on my part. And it wasn't a lot of money. I think I ended up breaking even when the whole thing was over. But I wanted to say I played Switzerland. When I got there, I didn't realize, but Dan Baird was on the bill. I'm like, oh, cool, man. Love Dan. I was opening for Dan is what the gig was. And his band with Warner Hodges. And it was great. It was a fun night. The guy that was working the merch for Dan was a really nice English guy. And I guess he was managing Dan, but I didn't think about it. But we got along. And he liked me. So I was easy to work with. I was just there to have a good time. And it was Dan's show. It's not my thing. I'm opening. So whatever has to happen, I'm cool with. I'm there to do my thing and get the hell out of the way and not be a problem for anybody else. That's just the way the opening thing is. And so I just enjoyed doing it. And it was good. I got along with the merch guy. Little did I know, the merch guy was Mick Brown, and he's Ian Hunter's manager. So 6 months or sometime a year later, he reaches out. He's like, hey, Otis, it's so fun working with you. He invited me to come do a tour with Ian Hunter, go do a whole tour with Ian frickin' Hunter. And that's how I got the gig doing that tour, is because I went way out of my way to do that gig in Herisau, Switzerland. Sometimes and I didn't know that's anything like that would come of it. I just wanted to do the gig. I wanted to go play for people in a different place. And so I get asked a lot by musicians on the channel, leaving comments like, how do you get this or that or whatever? And sometimes you just have to make a lot of effort and do something, and you have no idea what the possible outcome might be. Because who would really think going and playing some small town in Switzerland could turn into something else other than just going and playing the gig? And the gig was enough for me. So sometimes you gotta, and I've done a lot of things like that nothing, big came out of it other than doing the gig. For every one time something like that happened, they're probably 50. Nothing did. But, you go do it. And because you enjoy doing it and you want to meet new people and spread the word and all that stuff. Anyway, I just wanted to say some of that, and maybe I'll tell that story about the Ian Hunter gig again on the channel. I made a video a couple of years ago when the channel was a lot smaller. Not a lot of people saw it. Maybe I'll redo that video and retell that story. That was a fun one. But I think you dig it. But I'm going to put a video up here of Paul Simon made yesterday talking about Paul Simon and his hearing loss problems. And I also told some Smith stories, which was pretty, I think a lot of you will enjoy that. But click on that. And I don't know, man. Here's to Tina Turner. Go look up that country album and listen to that Dylan cover. It's really great. And I'll talk to you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.